Greetings. This is today's Durham Jazz Workshop Meet the Artist interview, back in a flash. Okay, here we are in a flash, as I said a few minutes ago. Here's Brad Linde, who is our guest today. He is a saxophonist, a multi-instrumental saxophonist, composer, educator, band leader, and man of eclectic musical interest. And he'll be playing with Jim Ketch at Shark 9 on August the 6th with a quintet, playing the music of Freddie Redd, which is what this is all about today. So Brad, who is, most people, I mean, many people I think want to know, who is Freddie Redd and why have you planned to play his music?
Yeah, Freddie Redd's one of those musicians, a kind of an underground figure who was there all along during the heyday of bebop and hard bop, and due to his nomadic nature, often just got up and left the scene when he felt like it was time to go somewhere else. So it was kind of hard to track him down and keep consistent tabs on, his whereabouts or his output or, whatever his activities were. And Freddie Redd is most famous for being a part of the Shirley Clarke living theater production. I'm sorry, the living theater production of The Connection, which was a kind of an off-Broadway play in 1959, 1960 in New York about musicians and various people waiting for their dealer to show up in this apartment, this loft. And he wrote the music for it, but he also was an actor on stage in the play with his quartet, which included saxophonist Jackie McLean. And he eventually was in the Shirley Clarke movie version of this play, The Connection, and then he recorded the soundtrack for Blue Note Records in 1960. And so, the music is out there, just not very well known.
So here we have this unknown musician,
Mhm.
semi-known, known mainly by other musicians.
Right.
What makes his music interesting to you?
So for me, the way I discovered his music, because this actually goes back 20 years to when I was
Mhm.
working at Borders bookstore over on the 15501 Chapel Hill Boulevard,
Mhm.
and I was the music supervisor, and we were getting in all these
Ah,
great reissues of Rudy Van Gelder Blue Note records, and Verve was put. I mean, the early 2000s was a great time for CD reissues and availability in jazz. So I was focusing on alto at that point as a saxophone player, and I was really checking out a lot of Jackie McLean. And I had purchased this book. I actually have it right here. This book by Lewis McAdams called "Birth of the Cool." It was
mhm.
about the Beat generation, the avant-garde in America. And there was a chapter about this living theater production, and it
Mhm.
mentioned Freddie Redd, who I'd never heard of. But because Jackie McLean was on it, I wanted to find this recording. So I wrote to Blue Note Records and I said, "Hey, are you ever going to release this Connection soundtrack? Because I can't find it anywhere." This is really
Mhm.
before like eBay and e-commerce took off. And they wrote me back and they said yes, they had plans to re-release it, but not for a while. And
Yeah.
so anyway, I found a copy of the VHS of the movie at Visart Video in Carborough. It was, a used copy they had rented for years, and so a friend of mine told me about it. I purchased it for like $5 and watched it, and it's not terribly exciting, but it's an interesting story, and it's great to see Freddie play this music. So when he was asked to write the music, it was supposed to be in the style of Charlie Parker. And
Mhm.
so Freddie actually had lived across the hall from Charlie Parker on Christopher Street in the Village, and he was playing with people like Charles Mingus and was working with John Orr and Wilbur Ware and all these great musicians.
Mhm.
So he wrote this music. But what makes it interesting is that with all the bebop language that it has, it's uniquely Freddie's own language, harmonically and in terms of form. So, like, his tunes may sound like something you've heard before, but it'll have a little extension on it. It's not your standard 32 bar, 10 pan alley tune. It's not your standard 12 bar blues. And so each kind of coming from his history of as a thespian, I think each of his tunes have a character to them, or they tell a little story, or they have some kind of cinematic or dramatic quality to them. So I think that's what's so fascinating about his music.
So the first time was the first time you actually heard his music on the video.
Yeah, yeah, on the
Aha.
video. Yeah, and it
And
was just snippets, just very short, not a full performance or anything.
so then what did you do after that?
I forgot about it for about two years. I was just checking out Jackie McLean, and
Yeah.
then I moved to the Washington D.C. area for graduate school in 2005, and right
Mhm.
before I left, they actually re-released that album, The Connection, on CD, and so I purchased that. And they also released this kind of the sequel to it, which was called Shades of Red, which had the same instrumentation, but they had added Tina Brooks on tenor saxophone. And
Mhm.
for someone who loves Lenny Tristano and Lee Konitz and Warren Marsh, a two-horn alto and tenor front line was
Mhm.
unusual at that time without a trumpet, or without a trombone. So it was interesting
Yeah.
that Freddie was using that front line in a hard bop setting. But I forgot about it, and then I was teaching as a graduate student at the University of Maryland, and I was going through a fake book, and I found just a lead sheet to Freddie Redd's "Time to Smile," which was one of the tunes from The Connection.
Mhm.
And I started playing it, and I thought, man, this music's great. So I did an octet arrangement of it for my band, and we played at a club one night. And a friend of mine, who I don't think I knew at the time, we became friends through this. He said, "Whoa, you're playing a Freddie Redd tune?" I said, "Yeah, I like Freddie Redd." And he said, "Well," he goes, "I think I might be able to hook you up with Freddie Redd's copyright deposits at the Library of Congress. You could see all of his
Oh
lead
my
sheets." And I thought, oh, that's a great, it's a free resource here. But you have to have a letter from the composer or the estate to access, to make copies of these lead sheets. So my friend Bertrand Uberall, he put me in touch with Michael Cascuna at Mosaic Records, who had put out the Freddie Redd box set a couple of years earlier. And Michael actually provided me with Freddie Redd's phone number. And so it wasn't enough for me to just get access to his music, which Freddie granted me.
God.
Um, he was living in a mobile home out in Hollywood, California, with his wife and dog. He had been out there for several years, and so not only did I put together all of his music for like a tribute to his music concert in November of 2008 in DC, I said, "Well, Freddie, why don't you come out? Why don't I fly you out to the East Coast and let's play this music together? You're still around, and it's such beautiful and joyous music. I'd love to work with you if you're willing." And he said, "Absolutely." So I booked some gigs at Smalls Jazz Club in New York City, and
Mhm.
one here at Twins in DC. And he flew out for a weekend, and we did some rehearsals, and it kind of jump started his career
Wow.
again. And so he came out and stayed in College Park near my place. We drove up to New York together. We stayed, in a hotel, separate rooms, but enjoyed the city together. And it was quite a homecoming for him. It had been a couple of years since he had played in New York. This was in 2009. And then the relationship blossomed to the point where I had us gigs. We played at Birdland, at Dizzy's
Mhm.
Coca-Cola. We did more engagements at Smalls and here in DC, Bohemian Caverns. And then he ended up moving to Baltimore area
Yeah.
to be closer to the action that we were doing together.
So he basically moved across country because that's where the music was. And that's where he
Yeah,
could
he
play.
said,
And he's, if I remember his age correctly, you're talking about a guy that's in his early 80s by then, I think.
right, right. He would have
Because
been,
he was 92 or so when he died.
right, and this was 2010, so he was 80, 81, 82 when we started working with
Yeah.
him. And he would say about California, he said, I asked him about the scene out there, and he said it's a beautiful corpse, and uh, that nothing was happening. He might have had a little restaurant gig or something. But he was always, one of the fascinating stories he tells me. I was going to tell these stories, next Friday night, but one of the things he said is, when he would be in town, like in New York, he and John Orr, the bass player for Monk's Quartet, and a
Mhm.
drummer like Shadow Wilson or something, they would get in a John Orr's station wagon. They would drive around to clubs or bars that had pianos and say, "Hey, we'll play here." and if you like us and we bring a crowd, then you can pay us the next time we come. And he said, Freddie told me this. I don't know if this is true. I mean, I don't have any reason to doubt it, but he said he started music at the 55 bar. I mean, at the five spot. Um, that he and John were the first ones to go there and start,
Yeah,
pitching music that, made Thelonious Monk and Ornette Coleman famous and all that. But so he was always, around doing it.
I'm sure he was also full of stories that you will can choose among
Yeah,
for a week from tomorrow, or was it a week
absolutely.
from today?
Week
I've
from
lost
today.
track of the days.
Week from today.
Um, a week from today. So, yeah, and I don't think you're spoiling anything by telling that story now, but it's a true musician's story for
Yeah.
sure. I've got a little bit of Freddie. Well, however much we want to play, I've got what is it? Nika Steps Out
Hmm.
on my share screen. Why
Okay.
don't we listen to a little bit of that? Try to get enough of Freddie to for people to understand what you're talking about. So let's first make sure it works. Oh, it appears to.
No, no, just straight. Repeat. No reverb. One, two, one, two, three,
Okay, what we've got. Let me get back to. Try to get back to us. I can see you in the corner now. And this is not where I wanted to be, but that's okay because that happens. Let me get back to the share screen. I had to stop the show. Oh, there we are. Somehow I forget that occasionally. Well, we got to listen to you play, and we're going to have to fast forward a bit, but that gives people a sense of certainly you're playing that night, and that's one of Freddie's tunes.
Yeah, that was actually a really special evening, not necessarily meant to be caught on camera and uploaded, but that was an experiment that we tried, very successful experiment. That was a house concert up in Boyd's, Maryland. The engineer for these two albums that just came out, John Cook, he would host, you know,
Mhm.
sessions, and so we decided that maybe because Butch Warren is a local DC legend,
Right.
that worked with Monk and worked with Dexter Gordon and Sonny Clark and all those guys, we said we should probably get them together. They had never worked together despite having
Ah,
been in New York at the same
okay.
time. And so that was the first meeting, and that was my old Kurzweil keyboard that Freddie's playing, and that's one of Freddie's tunes. It's a tune based on I Got Rhythm called Nika Steps Out. He was close with the Baroness, um,
Mhm.
Nika, so he wrote that for her. But the one thing that's great about Freddie, and even in his 1960s recordings, is his comping. The
Mhm. And that's
one
really
thing
noticed. It's hard
yeah,
to hear on there, but he's there if you pay attention.
yeah, and that's one thing I mean, if anyone asks me to, reflect on my time with Freddie, I'll always remember the creative and sensitive comping that he provided. It was more orchestrating than just, hitting the chords. He was, coming up with, almost like a new tune underneath the soloist, and
Yeah.
always very sensitive, and he was old school. He was coming more out of Bud Powell and Thelonious Monk. He sounded, not similar to Sonny Clark or Wynton Kelly or Red Garland or Barry Harris or those guys that he was around.
Mhm.
But he had he had this crystal clear touch like Sonny Clark. That's and I was a huge Sonny Clark fan growing up. But Freddie has a little more dark corners to his harmonies than I think maybe than Sonny did. But I'll always remember we'd finish every time I'd finish a solo, he'd always try to catch my eye and he'd go, he'd give me some approbation, beautiful or something, before he would start his solo. And if I didn't look over, he'd wait to compliment the soloist before he would continue.
And I mean, that's a subtlety that we listeners wouldn't necessarily catch again. But it's it's just part of what makes everything happen.
Hmm.
Sure.
Absolutely.
So, okay, you've got Freddie Redd's music. What should people expect next
Well,
Friday? Friday night?
yeah, I'm loath to admit this because it's such popular and great music. Most people know Freddie Redd from the Connection soundtrack,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and then for a famous tune he wrote called "The Thespian," which is very much like Thelonious Monk's "Brilliant Corners." It has the tempo change. It's this long tour de force. Um, But the reason we're doing this gig is because I had sent, when these CDs came out, I had sent them to Jim Ketch, and Jim loved the music, and he was like, "This is right up my alley. Let's do a gig. Let's do a gig of this music." And I said,
Super.
"Great." So what it is it's music we recorded in 2013 with Matt Wilson and Michael Formanek and Brian Settles and Sarah Hughes. And it's all Freddie Redd originals, but a lot of them either were not recorded previously or
Mhm.
they were only recorded in a trio setting, and so we added horns to them. So this record called Reminiscing that I've put out, came out. I'm not sure it made it to Freddie before he passed away. Yep, that's it. And so we're going to play all the music off of that, and that's so you'll get to hear your new favorite Freddie Redd tunes. Um, and I believe Sharp Nine's still at one set, so it's
Yeah,
yeah, I don't think we'll be stretching out for 2 hours, but
you might
we,
like to.
yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, we would.
Yeah,
We would.
I could see you and Jim. And who's playing with you again?
So, you know, I've been away from DC from North Carolina for about 17 years, but I still keep in touch, obviously. So, I selected some musicians that I used to work with when I was a student at UNC. So, Stephen Kaufman, who's a member of the
Right.
NC Bureau, he'll be playing drums, and Jason Foreman, who was at UNC Greensboro when I was at Elon.
Mhm.
He'll be on bass. So we've known each other for about 20 years. And Kevin Timmons, who was a piano player with us at UNC in the early 2000s, and he lives in Winston-Salem and works as a piano player there. So he'll be on piano. And I chose Kevin because he's a little more modern uh, than Freddie Redd, but I get the same feeling from Kevin in a different way that I got from Freddie, a very attentive and sympathetic accompanist, and he swings really hard, and I think he'll do the music great justice.
Yeah, that sounds, I don't know. I don't think I've heard Kevin play before, so I'm really looking forward to that. I mean, I know everybody else, but it sounds like it's going to be fun because you guys, I know Jim's enthusiasm, and now that he's retired, I think he's even more enthusiastic.
Great.
And he's out there to play and make his playing count. So
Well, and
I
he's
also have
also
one more thing here.
Sure.
Let me just put this up here.
Okay.
See if I can do this. I think it works this way.
Yeah.
This is, let's see, this is a recording and I'm having trouble. I can't look at the front of it and look at the
Just
screen.
come up a little. Just come up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, but this is Butch Warren and Freddie Redd at the Baltimore Jazz Loft with you and Matt Wilson.
Right. So that was
another
recorded.
recording that you all did.
That was the evening. That was the loose evening session. You know, Butch. It's mostly Butch Warren compositions. You know, he didn't really, you know, read. He didn't really read Freddie's charts. They're a little too eccentric in some ways. And Butch
Yeah,
was at a point in his career where he was just, you know, playing tunes. But
yeah.
so we played a lot of Butch's tunes, and it was just like a jam session, more of a session, you know. And I tried to get out of the way as much as possible to let Butch and Freddie shine. And that was all because Matt Wilson was really excited about playing with Butch Warren. And
Mhm.
later that month, Matt had a gig at the Kennedy Center and invited Butch to come sit in with him. And I picked Butch up from his apartment and we drove and Butch sat in with Matt Wilson. And Butch told me on the way home, he said that was the first time he had ever played the Kennedy Center after living in
Wow.
DC almost his entire life. And I thought, oh,
Yeah.
that's really that's
And
really strange, but also I'm glad he had the opportunity. And then he passed away that October. Um,
ah,
so
yeah, I somewhere along the way I missed Butch's passing. I know I lived in Alexandria from 2003 to 2011, but I did, and I knew that's when Butch, I think, was coming back
yeah,
and
absolutely.
playing at Madam's Organ or something,
Columbia
or
Station.
Columbia Station.
Yeah,
And yeah, but I know that he had made that comeback, and it's so great to hear. I didn't catch his passing, unfortunately.
yeah.
But I was listening to this Baltimore Jazz Loft recording in my car last night as I drove back and forth to Holly Springs to listen to vibraphonist Brandon Mitchell, a graduate of Elon.
Yeah, right. I know Brandon.
And I didn't look at the backup to check the tunes out, but certainly it swung a lot harder than the Reminiscing CD, which I also had in the car earlier. And Freddie, I really enjoyed Freddie's playing on the Baltimore Jazz Loft thing because you hear a lot. You hear, comparatively speaking, you hear more of his playing. And if you want to hear him kind of more at fuller tilt,
Sure, yeah.
it's a really good listen.
I think removing you know, that the one thing that I was tasked with working with Freddie is getting him to play his own music because if not, you know, if we go to these gigs in New York or whatever, and people are expecting to hear, but Freddie, you know, he might say, "Hey man, let's play a blues," and I'll be like, "Yeah, okay, Freddie," but and we get done with the blues, and then we play a standard or something, and then Freddie go, "Hey man, let's play a blues," and I'd be like, "Well, Freddie, we just played a blues, you know, a tune ago." He'd be like, "Yeah, let's play another blues," and so there's two blues on that recording. But once, you know, I mean, he was much more comfortable playing the standards that, you know, we all grew up playing, him especially. And even though his music was beautiful, you know, and so, you know, original, it was a task to get him to play it. You know, I feel weird putting putting his charts in front of him, you know, and saying, "Hey, Freddie, let's play. I want
Yeah.
you to play your tunes." So, but I think that was the success of my time with him was I was able to corral him to playing his tunes as much as possible.
Well,
So,
it sounds like you do you work with a lot of people, and it sounds like you really appreciate the folks you work with, which actually segues nicely into looking farther ahead, because Brad will be coming back to Sharp 9 in October, on the 15th and 16th of October with, I don't know what I heard you rehearsing the other day, but I'm not sure how big the band, how many
Oh,
people you all playing with you.
well, that's going to be very special. So, Lee Konitz's 94th birthday,
Hmm.
94th birthday will be October 13th. He passed away in 2020 from COVID, and he was my mentor,
Yeah.
and hero and friend. And so I'd like to do a tribute to him. Didn't get a chance to because of COVID. You know, we didn't get to have a really memorial. So I'd like to do a little memorial performance for Lee, and in an effort to celebrate the great clarinet and saxophonist Jimmy Giuffre's centennial this year. I have created my own access to the 1959 albums Jimmy wrote for Lee Konitz. So one album is five saxes and rhythm section that had Bill Evans on the on piano, and those are
Wow.
some standards that are for orchestrated five saxes and rhythm section. And then Jimmy did a different album for six brass, three trumpets, three trombones, and rhythm section with all of Bill Evans featuring Lee Konitz on
Wow.
tunes with you. And so I have commissioned the transcribing of those charts, and we're going to present the entire 1959 body of work that they collaborated on. And so it's going to, and then it's not a big band, but we're going to put it together as a big band at the end and do something different. But yeah, that's going to be really exciting because I played those charts with Lee in 2010 and 2012, and he
Mhm.
hadn't seen them since the recording session and in 59. So that was really special. And I'm excited to be able to kind of step into his shoes,
Yeah. Yeah. I
really,
had not known Konitz until I heard him at the Art Center in Carborough with Dan Tepfer,
right?
and he was very Konitzian. So
Yeah,
when you see Lee Konitz, you get Lee Konitz.
right.
Um, and that was a marvelous experience. So this sounds like fun. And how big? What's the instrumentation for
Um,
you guys?
For us, I mean, it'll be the same as the recording. So I'm going to
Okay,
do it in two parts. So my idea, if we're at two sets, would be to start the evening with four tunes by the saxes and rhythm section, then do four tunes by the brass and rhythm
got
section,
it. Oh
and
my
then take
God.
a break, and then flip it, and because there's eight tunes each, and then do four of the brass, four of the saxes, and then end with a big band chart where everybody gets to blow. Because a very narcissistic thing for me to do on those records, it's only Konitz soloing, and sometimes Bill Evans, and then Warren Marsh gets a couple of
Mhm.
chances to blow, and then there's a blues where Jimmy Giuffre and Ted Brown and Hal McCusick play. So I'll open it up. I'm more of a late Konitz
Mhm.
disciple, where he's playing slowly and
Yeah,
abstractly. And
yeah.
so when the tempos get a little fast, I tend to not enjoy it as much. So Aaron Hill's on the gig. So if he doesn't get too bluesy, I'll let him take a full ride on him.
Yeah, we'll just try to keep the bluesy under control there. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll tell a
And
story.
now, have people ever accused you of being too ambitious?
The city paper here in DC did once describe my performances. They said Lindy's performances are as ambitious as hell, and uh, yeah, I mean, I don't know, maybe I am, but I just, in my teaching too, I just think that if the people that created this music are still walking the earth, and I'm at a good age where I was able to access some of these
Yeah,
players,
yeah,
um, then I think you have to go to the source. I worry about jazz students that are jazz students of jazz teachers who were jazz students of jazz teachers, that come up through,
yeah,
no offense to the university system, but the thing I
yeah,
always loved about Jim Ketch was he brought in the people from the records that we admired. That
yeah,
first being around Barry Harris changed my life. So I'm trying to give that same feeling or that
yeah,
same
yeah.
opportunity to myself and my musicians.
Okay, and that's just October 15th. October 16th, you're doing Sun Ra, of course, which is exactly what I'm sure what listeners or viewers are expecting. Of course, he'd go from Lee Konitz and Jimmy Giuffre to Sun. I mean, what else would you
There
put?
is a common thread, though.
Okay, tell me about it.
So my at this point in my career, I don't feel responsible for knowing the whole history. I mean, I know the whole history of jazz music, but I feel like as developing a personal style, I don't have to I don't have to be the hard bop or the Michael
Yeah.
Brecker. But so where I tend to lean into, obviously the cool school and free jazz, is very important to me because Lenny
Mhm.
and Lee were the first ones to record free jazz in 1949. Um, but Sun Ra's music, this is something I'm doing with my students at Georgetown Day School. Sun Ra's music has all those things that I love. It sounds like a standard. It's got
Yeah.
bebop vocabulary in it, and then it goes into these unknowns, these collective improvisations, this free music. It has all, and it has all the romanticism of the swing era. So when I saw
Mhm.
Sun Ra's orchestra here in DC, out of this free jazz romp, Marshall Allen stood up and played Cocktails for Two. Unironically, it sounded like a Fletcher Henderson arrangement with
Yeah.
with Marshall blowing wildly on top. And I said that makes sense to me. So I'm just road testing some arrangements. It's all his Chicago music from the late '50s, early '60s. So it's not, you
Yeah.
know. Sorry.
It's let's see. I think a lot of people want to hear. They think of Sun Ra. They think of the totally free stuff, and really don't know the structure that he had, and where he came from, and how his disciples have kept it going. And Marshall Allen has still been is keeping on somehow at
Right.
in his mid 90s, um, probably in short bursts, I suspect. But in other words, let's see, maybe your October 16th gig could be um, titled, "You really want to understand Sun Ra? You
You
really
know,
want to
that's
appreciate Sun Ra?"
right. I mean, when I hired some of the musicians, I asked some new musicians. It's a different band than the night
Yeah.
before, but I just remember one of the musicians going, "Oh, I don't, that Sun Ra's music's too free. I don't really like it that much." And I said, "I don't think you've actually listened to Sun Ra."
Yeah.
And so the tunes I picked, they could sound like Tad Dameron, they can sound like Lucky Thompson, they could sound like you know Fletcher Henderson or Duke Ellington. So there's this.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
picked a wide variety of the sounds, but focusing on the things that make Sun Ra unique, the use of electronics, keyboards,
Yeah.
marrying futuristic sounds with the ancient sounds, so a lot of percussion. Sun Ra's such a early proponent of Afrofuturism.
Yeah.
The whole philosophy and culture around, it's hard to, it's impossible to divorce that from the music, which makes it, you have to treat it in a certain way. So I'm looking forward to that. But as music, absolute music, there's so much to it,
Yeah.
and I think it'll be fun.
Oh, without a doubt, fun. If nothing else, it should be fun. I
Right.
suspect. And folks, the folks that are watching this, that you've got a lot to look forward to with those two nights. And I'm looking forward to both. I'm more familiar with the Konitz Giuffre style, but I need an evening like that with Sun Ra's music. Even at my age. I mean, then I can say that I'm totally mature. So, so
Well,
at
I mean,
least,
you're right. No, that's the idea, though. It's, I mean, I think maybe years ago when I started working with Freddie, I remember a colleague of mine said, nobody wants to be lectured to on the bandstand. And I said, well, but I feel an obligation or a responsibility to explain difficult music to the audience in terms of helping them to understand it and appreciate it, because I was a bebop, uh, you know, uh, de devotee so long, and I wouldn't listen to anything else. And
mm,
I missed out on a lot of stuff. I feel like I maybe could have hung out with Steve Lacy or Jimmy Giuffre or George Russell had I been a little more open-minded in my youth. But I think it just takes time, your own journey. But I think presenting this kind of music and saying, take a chance on it. I'm taking a chance on it.
yeah,
It
yeah.
works.
Yeah, and I even now, as much as I've listened to, there's always stuff that I don't like Sun Ra that I don't really know that well, or
Right.
musicians. I mean, I'd never heard of Freddie Redd before I saw the title of your gig next week.
Right.
So, and that's what else are we here for? I don't think that's the answer. That's the question that answers things.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
and it's beautiful. I mean, there's just so much out there, and again, I can't be responsible for all of it at this point, and I wouldn't want to be, because this music feels honest to me,
yeah,
or at least when I'm performing it. And it all started with the idea of what would it be like to sit in Jerry Mulligan's shoes and play the birth of the cool music, you know? And I got to do
Yeah.
that with Lee Konitz, you know, or what would it be like um, to play the Patrick Berry parts on, you know, the Sun Ra stuff, or whatever it is. And so it came from an educational,
Yeah.
experiential learning thing. And then, you know, people can make their decisions, but hopefully they'll buy a Sun Ra record, and they'll buy a Freddie Redd record, and they'll check out Lee Konitz or Jimmy Giuffre. You know, that's the idea.
And I'd like you to I recommend that you bring more copies of Reminiscing and the Baltimore Jazz Loft, if they're
I
not
will.
all in Japan by now, and to the gig next week, because I think people would like to hear more.
I will.
Listen, thanks very much for your time today. I know you're a busy guy, even though it's summertime, school's
Right.
off, blah, blah, blah. You've only got a gig to get ready for next week, and then stuff on down, they get ready for school,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera. And just hang out a second. I'm gonna just say goodbye on the recording here, and then we can chat a little bit more.
Well, thank
Okay,
you so
folks, that's it.
Thank you.
Listen, go to Sharp 9 next week, August 6th, 8 o'clock. You will hear what this man has been talking about. And talking is only a little bit of the story. It's the listening that counts. So I'll see you there.